When you start drawing portraits, the first challenge you have is getting a likeness to the person. That often puts people off because you spend some time drawing and it just doesn't look like the person, and you rub it out on your watercolour paper and you damage the surface, and then you draw it again and it's still not right, and you just get fed up and stop and go and do something else. I believe very strongly that getting a likeness and be able to draw a likeness from a photo or from life is a wonderful skill, and being able to then paint it and bring it to life is another wonderful skill, but they are different. My suggestion is that we use a transfer method to get the drawing onto our page as we start to learn portraits. And then when we've got some experience and confidence, then we can start working on those drawing skills. Let me show you a few. I'll come to those. The one you'll be familiar with is tracing paper. The very easiest way of transferring is to print your photo out onto a piece of paper that doesn't matter, and then scribble over the back. You could use charcoal, that's a bit messy, or just use a soft pencil and scribble over the back. You then turn it the right way round and draw over all the lines that you want, and they will transfer onto your paper. Obviously, the problem is that you will have damaged your photo, so if it's precious, we don't want to do that. If you don't want to damage your photo, then tracing paper is another option. Again, we all know from school or from other experience that we can do draw the lines that we want as far more accurately than I'm doing here. Again, we turn it over, we can scribble on the back and then go over the lines again and transfer those to our paper. Further option is to use carbon paper, or even better, it's called trace down paper. Some carbon papers that you might use in something like an invoice book or something like that can leave quite a waxy line. So you can get trace down paper that doesn't. Simply put it under your photo and then transfer the lines that you want. Again, both tracing paper and this just gives you a like-for-like size. You can even get special spray that comes in an aerosol that you just spray on the back of your picture, and it leaves a sort of a black residue all over, and that turns it into carbon paper, and you can then trace things. If you want to go a little bit more high-tech, you can use something like this, which is called a light pad. I mean, this is an A3 one, but A4 ones are available online for not a lot of money. This is a battery operated one, but you can get them that just use a phone connector to charge. It's in a darker situation, and here I am in a light-filled studio, so this isn't working. I would actually be able to see the details of my photo through that £140 paper and be able to just trace that straight off. Light pad is a really good investment for transferring portraits or indeed other drawings to your paper, but use it in a darkened room. On a bright summer's day, you can use a patio window in the same way. Just put your photo, then your paper, hold it up to the bright light, and as long as the room that you're in is pretty dark, then you'll be able to see those details through. Or you can use your computer screen, as long as it's not a touch screen. And those are other ways of transferring your image. And another possibility is to use your mobile device. There are apps which use the front and rear camera to help you draw and transfer your images. But what happens if you want to make an image bigger? There's a method that's called the gridding method that has been used for centuries, and it still works really well today. The principle is, if you want to make your image larger, you grid up, you put squares on your image, and then you put larger squares on your final paper and you transfer from one to the other. I'll show you how. Just say is don't make your squares too big. Now you can draw the squares onto your image, or there are gridding tools online which will just do it for you far quicker and far more accurate. A piece of paper must be in the same proportions as the image that you are making bigger. Having prepared your photo with its grid, you need to draw out on your eventual piece of paper squares of the appropriate size. And if you've got 15 squares, which I have here, I've counted them, across there, you need 15 squares on your final grid, and it's 21 high. And the more accurately you draw your squares, the more accurate the transfer will be. So let's start up here, and I look at that and think that shadow pretty much starts in the corner of that square, and it only goes up to be about a quarter of the way up. And I do exactly the same in that square. So let's just tick that off so we don't get confused. Some people do number the squares because it can get confusing. So we start at that point there. I notice that it doesn't come up higher, it goes down, but it doesn't finish in the corner. It finishes a bit higher up, and there is a kink in the middle. So I do exactly that. In this square here, there is nothing, or well, apart from that. So that's fine. And the next square, there's hardly anything. Let's come back over here, and I notice that shadow comes just down the side, all the way down to the bottom. There's a little bit there. I notice his eyelid comes across, and it finishes about a third of the way along. So it's about there, and then it carries on. So that is there. Then it goes all the way through the next square, and then it comes down through that square. So that is his eyelid there, made bigger. Now the next square down, which is the one with his iris in, I notice that the top of the eye just hits the line, and then it comes down. We've got a little triangle in the next square over here, like that. I'm looking at the bottom of his eye is rough, well, just above halfway in that square, something like that. Then there's a triangle of the white that comes into the next square, and that continuation goes about 2/3 of the way across there. So that is the sort of shape roughly of his eye. Let's look at the placement of the iris. The iris isn't quite touching this line here, and it's definitely not touching that eye line there. So we could put it pretty much like that. And do reality check, keep looking and just making sure that you haven't confused anything. So let's look at this shadow here. It comes, the top third goes across and then sort of comes down like that, and then it goes into the square below like that. The line comes across, cuts off the corner of this square and goes up like that. Should we just put his eyebrow in so we can look at the placement of the eyebrow? So we look at that square, we've got that little corner there for his eyelid, but the eyebrow comes across like this, and then it goes up and it sort of peters out here. The top of his eyebrow is on that line, and it sort of goes like that, down a bit, and it comes here and across something like that. So you methodically work through square by square, looking at where the lines intersect, the verticals and the horizontals, and you transfer them to your paper. Once you have transferred all the lines that you need, you can get rid of your grid. And you just do that gently and get rid of your grid, so that you are left just with the lines that you want and none of those guidelines. And that does make it hard for watercolour. It's a lot easier, say, if you're doing this for painting in acrylics or oil paint, because you're going to cover the entirety of your canvas and your paint is thicker and the lines won't show through. So I've done these grid lines relatively thick so that it shows up on film. If you're doing this, do them lighter so that they are easy to erase. This is a way of very directly making something bigger, or indeed smaller. If you've got a really large piece and you need to do it down, then your squares just need to be smaller than the squares on here. But usually we use it for making things bigger. Choose a transfer method that works for you or works for your picture, and use it to get your drawing down without having spent ages rubbing out and potentially damaging your final paper. And once you've got a little experience of painting portraits and you know you can do it and you've got techniques under your belt, then you can start to actually practice drawing freehand and getting a likeness. Don't let the problems of drawing and getting a likeness in a portrait put you off painting portraits. There are ways round it, and some of these transfer methods will really help you.